A brutal war raged across the stars. The Dominion, a ruthless alien empire, had pushed humanity to the edge. Entire planets burned under their onslaught, and the United Earth Defense Force was barely holding the line on the shattered world of Varkey 7. A desperate battle unfolded amidst the ruins of a once thriving colony. The last remnants of the human forces fought with dwindling supplies and no hope of reinforcements. In the heart of the battlefield stood Sergeant Elias Kane, a hardened soldier who had seen more death than most. He had fought in countless battles, but this one felt different. The enemy was relentless, pouring wave after wave of their monstrous warriors into the crumbling city. Human forces were outgunned and outnumbered, but retreat was not an option. Varkey 7 had to hold at all costs. The Dominion forces swarmed through the ruined streets, massive insectoid creatures with bioplasma weapons carved through concrete and steel. Human soldiers fell screaming under the onslaught, but Kane did not falter. His armor was scarred from a dozen battles, his rifle nearly out of ammunition, but his determination was unshaken. He rallied the few soldiers left around him, barking orders as the sky burned with orbital bombardments. A massive Dominion war beast crashed through the wreckage, a towering nightmare of chitin and fangs. It roared, a sound that made lesser men freeze in terror, but Kane did not hesitate. He leaped onto its back, slamming a combat knife into its thick hide. He climbed higher, dodging its thrashing limbs as it tried to shake him off. With a final lunge, he jammed a grenade deep into the creature's skull and jumped away. The explosion sent its body crashing into a Dominion gun line, sending their ranks into disarray. The soldiers under Kane's command pushed forward, inspired by his defiance against all odds. They repelled wave after wave of the enemy, but it was clear the battle was lost. Reinforcements were not coming, and their evacuation ships had been shot down. They were alone. Kane contacted High Command, his voice steady as he requested an orbital strike on their location. He knew what it meant. The city would be turned to glass, but it would also deny the Dominion their prize. There was a long silence on the other end before Command reluctantly confirmed the order. As the countdown began, Kane turned to his men and saw no fear in their eyes, only resolve. They stood beside him, battered and broken but unyielding. They had fought for each other, for their fallen brothers, and for humanity itself. There was no greater honor. The sky ignited as the first orbital round streaked downward. Kane watched the burning heavens and let out a breath. He had lived as a soldier, but now he would die as something more. The first blast struck and the world was consumed in fire. But Elias Kane did not die. When the flames cleared and the Dominion forces moved in to claim the ruins, they found something impossible. Kane still stood where he had fallen, his armor fused with the scorched ground, his body charred but whole, his eyes burned with an unnatural glow, and his wounds sealed before their eyes. The Dominion recoiled, sensing something beyond their understanding. Kane looked at them and smiled. Then he moved. Faster than any human should, he tore through the enemy with inhuman strength, his rifle empty but his hands deadly. He crushed skulls, snapped limbs, and ripped through their ranks like a force of nature. The Dominion commanders watching from orbit sent everything they had to destroy him, but he would not fall. Word of him spread through the surviving human forces across the war front, stories of a soldier who could not die, who fought like a demon among men. The Dominion began to fear the humans, not because of their armies or their weapons, but because of him. Elias Kane had become more than a soldier, he had become a legend. The Dominion commanders could not comprehend what they had witnessed. Elias Kane should have been nothing but ashes, yet he moved with a fury that defied all logic. The orbital bombardment had wiped out both friend and foe, leaving behind nothing but ruins and scorched earth, and yet he stood in the center of it all, untouched by death. The Dominion forces hesitated, something they had never done before. Their war doctrine was simple: annihilate anything in their path without question, but this was different. This was impossible. They had seen humans fight with desperation before, but this was not desperation, this was something else entirely. Kane moved before they could recover. He charged straight into their ranks, moving faster than their targeting systems could track. He tore the plasma rifle from a Dominion soldier and turned it against them, unleashing a storm of fire that cut through their armored forms like paper. His wounds sealed as quickly as they were inflicted, his strength seemingly without limit. The Dominion fell back, not from tactical retreat but from fear. They were a species bred for war, yet something about Kane triggered an instinct buried deep within them, the fear of the unknown, the fear of something beyond their understanding, the fear of something that should not exist. The Dominion warlord overseeing the assault received the reports with disbelief. No human should have survived an orbital strike, no soldier should have been able to fight without exhaustion. This was an anomaly, an error in the fabric of war itself. He ordered a full retreat of ground forces and a secondary bombardment. If the human would not fall, then the planet itself would be reduced to nothing. Kane watched the Dominion forces pull back, but he did not relax. Something deep inside him, something he did not understand, was pushing him forward. His mind was sharp, his thoughts clear, but there was something else, something new, a force burning within him that was not there before. He could feel the energy in his veins, a power he had never known, and it was growing stronger. He turned his gaze to the sky and saw the new wave of bombardments incoming. The Dominion would not take any chances this time. They would unleash hellfire until there was nothing left. He refused to let that happen. Without thinking, without questioning, he leapt not forward but up, higher than any human could ever hope to go. He soared toward the incoming fire, his mind screaming that this was impossible, but his body moving as if it had always been capable of such feats. The first plasma barrage hit, but it did not consume him. Instead, the energy, bent, twisted, flowed into him as if he was absorbing the very fire meant to destroy him. The Dominion fleet above Varkey 7 detected a new energy reading, one that sent their systems into chaos. Kane was no longer just a soldier, he was something else, and whatever he had become was not bound by the limits of human flesh. With a single motion he extended his hand, and the very weapons meant to erase him turned back toward their masters. The plasma barrages changed course, streaking toward the Dominion fleet as if responding to his will. The warlord had only a moment to process what was happening before the first ship was torn apart by its own firepower. Panic spread through the Dominion forces. They had faced human resistance before, but never something like this, never something that could fight beyond the laws of reality. Kane was not just surviving, he was winning, and he was doing it alone. As the last Dominion ships pulled away, retreating from the battlefield in a desperate bid to escape, he landed back on the shattered surface of Varkey 7. His boots hit the scorched ground, but he felt no weight, no exhaustion, just the ever-growing energy coursing through him. The battle for Varkey 7 was over, but the war had just changed. Elias Kane was no longer just a man, no longer just a soldier. He was something more, something the Dominion feared. And the galaxy would soon know his name. News of Varkey 7 spread across the galaxy at a speed faster than any ship or signal could carry it. The Dominion forces who had fled the battlefield refused to speak of what they had witnessed, but their silence only made the rumors grow. A soldier who did not die, a man who stood against an entire fleet and made the stars themselves burn at his command. The whispers reached Dominion High Command, and for the first time in their long history of conquest they hesitated. Elias Kane stood amidst the ruins of Varkey 7, but he no longer felt like the man he once was. His body was still human in form, yet every fiber of his being pulsed with something more. He could hear the hum of energy in the air, see beyond the visible spectrum, feel the very fabric of reality bending around him. He clenched his fists, and the very ground beneath him cracked as if it could no longer contain his presence. He should have been afraid, he should have questioned what he had become, but there was no fear in him, only certainty. The Dominion had taken everything from humanity. They had burned worlds, slaughtered billions, and now, for the first time, they had been forced to retreat. But retreat was not enough. Humanity had spent too long on the defensive, waiting for the next planet to fall, the next city to be erased. Elias Kane refused to wait any longer. The war had to end, and it had to end on humanity's terms. A Dominion scout fleet entered the Varkey system to confirm what had happened. No human signals had been detected, no distress beacons, no survivors. The Dominion believed the planet to be lifeless, and yet something pulled them forward, an unseen force that made them venture deeper than they should have. Kane stood on the remains of a Dominion war machine, watching the skies as the enemy ships descended. They came, cautious, weapons armed, ready for another battle, but Kane did not move. He simply raised a hand, and the ship stopped mid-air, frozen in place as if the very laws of physics no longer applied. The Dominion pilots struggled against their controls, alarms blaring as their ships refused to obey them. Fear crept into their voices as they sent distress calls to their command, but no response came. Kane could hear them, he could feel their fear, and for the first time he understood that he was not bound by the limitations of warfare as he once was. He closed his hand into a fist, and the ships above him shattered as if they were made of glass. The wreckage rained down upon the dead planet, and Kane turned away, uninterested in the destruction. He had sent his message. The Dominion was no longer the unstoppable force they believed themselves to be. Kane needed answers. He needed to know what had happened to him, what force had brought him back when he should have died, but there was no time for self-discovery. The war still raged, and humanity needed more than just another soldier. It needed a weapon that could end the war for good. The galaxy would soon understand that Elias Kane was not just a legend. He was their reckoning. The Dominion High Command convened in secrecy for the first time in centuries. Their warlords, their greatest minds, their most ruthless strategists all gathered to discuss one thing: Elias Kane. No human should have survived Varkey's 7. No soldier should have destroyed a fleet with nothing but his will, and yet the reports were undeniable. The wreckage of their ships, the silent distress calls, the terror in the voices of the few Dominion scouts who had managed to escape what had once been a simple war of conquest had become something else entirely. The Dominion did not fear humanity. They had crushed them at every turn, broken their worlds, burned their colonies, but Kane was not just another human. He was something new, something beyond their understanding, and that terrified them. They declared him an anomaly, a threat that had to be eliminated at all costs. No resource would be spared, no strategy was too extreme. They would hunt him, erase him, and bury his existence before the rest of the galaxy realized what he had become. But Kane did not wait for them to come. He had spent days on the surface of Varkey's 7 testing the limits of his newfound power. He no longer needed food, no longer needed rest. He could feel the pull of gravity, the hum of energy in the ruins around him. He could sense movement, light signals, entire fleets shifting in distant space as if they were mere pieces on a board waiting to be moved. And so he moved first. The Dominion had long relied on their overwhelming force, their ability to strike before their enemies could react, but Kane was faster. He appeared on the bridge of a Dominion battleship without warning, his arrival triggering alarms that had never been sounded before. The crew barely had time to draw their weapons before he moved, cutting through them with impossible speed. His hands glowed with energy that bent reality itself, and the ship trembled under his presence. The Dominion captain tried to sound the alarm, tried to call for reinforcements, but Kane simply looked at him and the signal died. The lights flickered, the ship itself groaning as if rejecting his very existence. There was no battle, no struggle. Kane did not need weapons, did not need strategy. He was the storm, and the Dominion fleet was nothing but dry leaves before him. One by one the ships fell, their systems turned against them, their crews frozen in terror as their vessels tore themselves apart. Kane did not feel rage, did not feel joy, he felt only purpose. The Dominion had taken everything from humanity, and now he would take everything from them. The last surviving ship fled, jumping to light speed. Before Kane could stop it, he let it go. He wanted them to run, he wanted them to spread the message across the stars. Elias Kane was coming. And the Dominion had nowhere left to hide. The Dominion's response was swift and brutal. They mobilized their entire fleet, every warship, every soldier, every weapon at their disposal, all pointed at the human menace who had become their nightmare. In their vast war machines they believed they could still win. They had fought wars for millennia and crushed civilizations across countless star systems. The humans were nothing more than an annoyance, a problem that could be solved with a display of overwhelming force. But they had never faced something like Kane. He had become more than just a legend. He was a force of nature. His reputation spread like wildfire through the galaxy, and the stories of his power inspired humanity's surviving forces to rally to him. Every human colony, no matter how far it was from the front lines, heard his name and knew that Elias Kane was coming for them. As the Dominion fleet assembled in the outer reaches of the galaxy, Kane appeared again. He had not waited for them to come to him. Instead, he went to them. His presence alone disrupted their communications and navigation systems, causing chaos among their forces. He arrived at the heart of the Dominion's armada without warning. His ships, the same ones he had used to destroy their fleet before, were now nothing more than weapons of war to him. Each ship was an extension of his will, bending to his command. As he approached the enemy with an air of absolute certainty, he stood alone on the battlefield, unafraid, watching as the Dominion forces scrambled to react. Kane's mind had become something more than human. His thoughts no longer aligned with the physical world, but instead had transcended them. He could feel every movement in the galaxy. He could see beyond the horizon of stars. He knew where the Dominion ships would move before they even thought it. In one sweeping motion, he raised his hand and the first wave of Dominion warships were torn apart as if their hulls were made of paper. The shockwaves from the explosions rippled through space, causing the enemy to stagger in confusion. But Kane did not stop there. He reached into the very core of their fleet, into the heart of their ships, and with a single thought, he crippled their engines and weapon systems. For the first time, the Dominion realized they were powerless before him. The human soldiers aboard the remaining ships felt the energy surge in their veins as they watched their once feared adversaries fall apart. Kane was their symbol now, their hope, their weapon, and together, they were unstoppable. The battle raged on, but it was a battle the Dominion could not win. Kane moved like a tempest across the stars, tearing through their defenses, his power growing with every strike. The more he fought, the more he became what the Dominion feared most, a symbol of defiance that no force in the galaxy could extinguish. And then, at the pinnacle of the battle, Kane did what no one thought possible. He turned their own weapons against them one by one. The Dominion ships, helpless in his presence, began to disintegrate. The weapons they had used to annihilate worlds were now turned upon them, and they burned as their own fires consumed them. In the midst of the destruction, the Dominion's highest commander, the one who had orchestrated the invasion of humanity and led their forces with ruthless precision, realized the depth of their failure. He had witnessed the destruction of his fleets, his soldiers, his empire, and now, standing in the ruins of his greatest victory, he came face to face with Cain. Elias Cain stood before him unyielding, a force of nature that had crushed the Dominion's might with nothing but his will. The commander tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Cain looked at him, not with hatred, but with the calm of a man who knew his purpose had been fulfilled. "You failed," Cain said, his voice a cold whisper that reverberated across the battlefield. "You thought you could crush humanity, you thought you could destroy us, but you were wrong." And with that, the last of the Dominion fleet vanished into the void. The galaxy had changed forever, and Elias Cain was now its reckoning. The war was over, but the universe had not yet fully grasped the magnitude of what had transpired. Elias Cain was no longer just a soldier or a weapon. He had become something else entirely, a symbol of humanity's defiance and a force of nature that defied understanding. The Dominion, once the galaxy's most feared empire, had crumbled before him, their fleets shattered and their commanders broken. Cain had erased their presence from the galaxy as if they had never existed. But even in the wake of his victory, the galaxy was not at peace. Humanity, having fought for so long, was left to rebuild from the ashes of the war. New governments formed, new alliances were forged, but none could deny the shadow that loomed over them, the shadow of Elias Cain. He had become a legend not just in the hearts of humans but across the galaxy, and with that legend came fear and uncertainty. The survivors of the Dominion, their warlords, and even their civilian populations were scattered throughout the galaxy. Many of them had witnessed the destruction of their fleets and the fall of their empire, but their hatred of humanity did not simply vanish. Some sought to regroup, others sought vengeance, and a few hoped to understand the power that had once belonged to their enemy. But none of them could predict what would come next. Cain had never asked for power, never sought to become more than a soldier, yet the transformation within him was undeniable. He had felt the growing force within his body, the surge of energy that connected him to something beyond the physical world, something greater than what he had ever been before. One day, as he meditated in the ruins of the Dominion's capital, a figure appeared before him. The person was human, but there was something in their eyes that was ancient, timeless. Their presence was overwhelming, their power subtly shifting the very air around them. "You have become something extraordinary, Elias Cain," the figure said, their voice smooth and knowing, "but this is only the beginning." Cain stood slowly, his expression unreadable. His senses had never been sharper, but he could not place this person's energy. It felt like nothing he had ever encountered. "Who are you?" Cain asked, his voice quiet but tinged with curiosity. "I am a guide," the figure answered, "and you are now part of something much larger than you realize." Cain remained silent, studying the figure. He had learned many things in his journey through war and survival, but this was different. This was not about the Dominion or humanity. This was something bigger than either. The figure continued, "What you have become is not an isolated event. The force that flows through you, the energy that shapes the universe, is now part of you. You are no longer just a human soldier. You have transcended that form. Elias, you are one of the few who can see beyond the veil of reality." Cain frowned, stepping closer. "Transcended? What does that mean?" "It means you are connected to something ancient, something universal. Your victory over the Dominion was just the start. Now you must decide how to use the power you hold. The galaxy will need a guide, someone to help it heal, to bring balance in a universe that has lost its way." Cain's mind raced. He had never asked for this, never sought to be more than the soldier who stood in the line of fire for his people, but now, he was faced with a choice he hadn't expected. The figure watched him carefully, their eyes filled with understanding. "You do not have to accept your new role, Elias, but the universe is changing, and you will play a part in it." Cain felt the weight of their words settle over him like a storm brewing on the horizon. He had done what no one thought possible. He had defeated the Dominion, but now he was being asked to do more than he had ever imagined. In the distance, the first light of a new dawn rose over the ruined landscape of the Dominion capital. Cain stood alone, the weight of the universe pressing against him. The choice was his, but whatever path he chose, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had not seen the last of Elias Cain. The galaxy had never been more uncertain, nor had its future seemed so fragile. The Dominion was no more, its empire reduced to dust, its fleet scattered and broken. But in the aftermath of such a cataclysmic war, the silence that followed was deafening. It was a time of rebuilding for humanity, a time to heal from the scars of battle and loss. Yet, the galaxy felt the shift in the air, the invisible weight of something greater stirring beneath the surface. Elias Kane had become the fulcrum of this change, the spark that could either ignite a new era of peace or plunge the galaxy back into chaos. He was no longer the man he had once been, the soldier who had stood firm against the overwhelming might of the Dominion, the one who had borne the weight of humanity's survival on his shoulders. He had transcended that role, had become something more, something beyond human comprehension. He had felt it, the pull of power, of knowledge, of purpose that had begun to shape his every thought, his every action. But with this newfound strength, the questions continued to haunt him: was he a force for good, or would his power twist him into something darker? The figure, the mysterious guide who had spoken to him, had said that the balance of the galaxy depended on him. Yet, how could he be sure that he was making the right choices? How could he be certain that he wasn't just another tyrant, albeit one with the power to shape entire worlds with a single thought? The galaxy had been through too much, too many wars, too much destruction. Could he truly prevent the cycle of violence and oppression from repeating itself? Could one man, no matter how powerful, alter the course of history? Was it even possible to rebuild something better from the ruins of what had been destroyed? Kane's thoughts were interrupted when a new signal reached him, a distress call from a remote colony, far on the outskirts of the galaxy. It was a cry for help, a plea from survivors on a planet still reeling from the destruction the Dominion had left behind. They had rebuilt, or so they thought, but remnants of Dominion war machines still stalked the surface, terrorizing the people, seeking to reclaim what had been lost. The survivors were trapped, their last hope exhausted. Kane had seen too many pleas for help, too many dying cries, to turn away now. He could feel the pull of that planet's suffering, as if it was another thread in the web of destiny that had drawn him here. The decision was clear. In an instant, he was there, on the desolate surface of the colony world, standing amidst the wreckage of long-forgotten battles. The Dominion's machines were still there, hulking, menacing, automated remnants of a cruel empire that had once dominated the stars. But now, they were nothing more than relics, pieces of a broken past. The survivors, awestruck and terrified, watched as the man who had become a living legend moved through the wreckage. He was not here to conquer or destroy, he was here to save, to rebuild, to protect what remained of humanity's future. With every step he took, the machines crumbled, their energy reserves running dry, their systems shutting down as if they were no longer worth the effort of fighting. His power, once wielded in fury and destruction, now surged forth with the intent to preserve and protect. As the last of the war machines fell silent, the survivors cautiously approached Kane, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. They had heard the stories of the man who had destroyed fleets and crushed the Dominion's greatest commanders. But to see him standing before them, a figure of calm amidst the devastation, was beyond anything they had imagined. Kane turned to face them, his expression solemn but filled with quiet strength. He had no words of grand prophecy, no speeches about destiny. His actions spoke for themselves. He had come not as a conqueror, but as a protector who would not let the galaxy fall back into the hands of those who would abuse its power. "The war is over," Kane said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of finality. "But that doesn't mean the fighting is done. There are still those who seek to destroy, to take what is not theirs. But we are stronger than they think. Together, we can rebuild. Together, we will ensure that humanity never again falls into the shadow of tyranny." The survivors, many of whom had seen nothing but war and suffering for as long as they could remember, felt a flicker of hope ignite within them. Kane's words, his presence, had given them something they had lost long ago, a reason to believe in a future worth fighting for. As the days passed, the colony world began to heal. Kane did not stay long. He had not come to lead, to rule, or to govern. His role was to guide, to protect, and to ensure that humanity would never again be forced to kneel before an empire of oppression. The survivors would rebuild on their own terms, not as subjects to be ruled, but as equals, free to forge their own path. Kane's journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be those who would challenge the peace he had fought to create. But as he stood on the edge of the colony, looking out into the stars, he knew one thing for certain: he would never stop fighting. He had been given a second chance, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. And he would make sure that no one would ever forget the name Elias Kane. The galaxy had its reckoning, and it had its protector. And as long as the stars burned in the sky, Elias Kane would be there, watching over them, ensuring that the future would not repeat the mistakes of the past. The legend of the man who did not die had become something more, a beacon of hope for all who dared to believe in a better tomorrow.